Have you ever stopped to ask, are you truly good or just trained to act like it? Take a moment. Think about how easily politeness replaces honesty. How quickly we censor ourselves to fit into what's expected. A polite nod instead of outrage. A crafted opinion instead of a gut reaction. In this world, is virtue really a choice or just obedience wearing a smile? Picture this, a dusty antique mirror hanging in a dark room. You step in front of it, searching for who you are. But the mirror only shows part of you, the part shaped by rules, rewards, and quiet shame passed down since childhood. What the mirror hides still exists, but it lives in the dark, in the parts you've learned to fear. In On the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche holds up that same mirror and dares us to look deeper, not to admire our reflection, but to question it. Who taught us to see good this way? Who benefits when you always choose silence over confrontation? When you hold back your instinct to protect someone else's comfort? Nietzsche argues that much of what we call goodness wasn't born from kindness, but from repression. From generations who couldn't express power, so they labeled power as evil. Who couldn't desire freely, so they named desire a sin. And in this twisted process, we stopped being whole. We became harmless. In a world where obedience gets applause, being good might simply mean, don't make waves, don't challenge, don't desire, don't rise too far above the crowd. But if your morality is just a script you were handed, how much of it is truly yours? Nietzsche's challenge is sharp. Maybe we aren't moral by choice. Maybe we're moral out of fear. And that fear, buried deep, becomes what he called the bad conscience. A silent wound, like a wild creature locked in a cage inside us, pacing, restless, unspoken. What if that wound is still alive in you, waiting to break free? Behind every quiet nod, every held-back word, every fake smile, there's a force that never got to be. Nietzsche believed we were not born to sit still. Ancient humans didn't live by rules. They lived by impulse, by a raw, pulsing instinct to act, conquer, create, defend. But as society grew, those instincts were caged, not erased, just rerouted. What once exploded outward now coils inward. Imagine a child running free across a wide field, laughing, wild, alive. Now picture that same child, forced into a stiff chair, told to be still, to be nice, to not speak unless spoken to. Day after day, desire becomes shame. Anger becomes guilt. Power becomes a problem. But that energy, it doesn't disappear. It turns around. It eats itself. This is what Nietzsche called bad conscience. A psychological wound that forms when the natural force of instinct is blocked by external demands. Social rules, moral codes, invisible punishments. What once gave us life now turns against us. The fire that could have built something starts to burn us from within. It doesn't stop at childhood. It grows into adults who doubt their own joy, who feel guilty for wanting too much, who apologize for existing too loudly. And all the while we call it virtue, we call it maturity. But deep down, we're just managing the fallout of instincts that were never allowed to breathe. In this system, morality isn't a compass, it's a cage with golden bars. It teaches us to smile when we want to scream, to comply before we think, to bury our desires and praise ourselves for it. But the soul knows. It always knows. Psychologist Carl Jung would later name this process shadow dissociation, the splitting off of everything society tells us is unacceptable. Anger, lust, power, grief, all exiled to the unconscious, but nothing repressed is ever really gone. The result? A society of exhausted people. People who say yes when they mean no. Who seem kind, but carry resentment like a second skin. And the saddest part? Most don't even realize it. That quiet unease you feel, that low-grade tension in your body, It's not just stress, it's not fixed by yoga or affirmations. It's the ache of a life half-lived, of a spirit forced into submission, still longing to move. And maybe, just maybe, what we've called a moral crisis all along is actually something else, a wild instinct, knocking on the walls we built around it, begging to return. At the end of the 19th century, the air was thick with smoke and doubt. Factories roared like steel monsters, chewing through bodies and time. Church pews stood empty. Science dethroned miracles with equations. Evolution told us we weren't created in God's image. We were just survivors, molded by chance. It was a time of rupture, and in that tension, Nietzsche wrote, fevered, clear-eyed, merciless. The Industrial Revolution had turned the human body into machinery, a cog in a system that didn't care if it broke you, as long as the gears kept turning. And while progress marched forward, faith collapsed behind it. The sacred lost its shine. The absolute became uncertain, and morality, once protected by pulpits and kings, started to fracture under the weight of modern life. Nietzsche didn't just witness the collapse, he named it. God is dead, he declared, not with joy, not in mockery, but as a stark diagnosis. God, as a symbol of unshakable values, had lost his power. And with that loss, the inherited sense of right and wrong began to unravel. Without a divine source, morality no longer stood on solid ground. It started to float, untethered, questioned. He wasn't alone. Influenced by Schopenhauer, Nietzsche saw life as driven by blind will and inevitable suffering. But where Schopenhauer sank into silence, Nietzsche chose defiance. He said yes to life, not the polite, obedient life, but the raw, dangerous, unfiltered kind. The kind that burns, doubts, hungers, creates. And so, in this world of rising machines and dying gods, he proposed something radical. What if we didn't need external rules to live well? What if morality wasn't inherited but invented, from the inside out? It wasn't just a philosophical idea, it was a rebellion, his way of surviving the collapse by becoming creators, not followers. But it came with a cost. His question still echoes like a knife. What if everything you call moral is just fear dressed in tradition? That question didn't just belong to the 19th century. It belongs to us now, in every rule we follow without asking why, in every judgment we make that feels more like habit than truth. To understand this shift, this earthquake in the soul, we have to go back. Not just to what broke morality, but to what built it, and to who held the hammer. There's something unsettling about this idea, that what we call virtue today may have been born from the silent hatred of those who could never win. Nietzsche draws a brutal but revealing line through history. He claims there were once two kinds of morality, not good and evil, but master morality and slave morality. The first wasn't about rules. It wasn't about guilt. It was about power, presence, vitality. To be good in that world meant to be whole, strong, courageous, unapologetically alive. Goodness came from overflowing, not from restraining. But the weak, the ones crushed, ignored, overpowered, began to twist that power into something shameful. They couldn't defeat strength, so they moralized it, inverted it, and so was born slave morality. A new code where power became cruelty, desire became sin, and joy became arrogance. Where the victim wasn't just pitied, they were glorified. Where suffering became sacred. Imagine a balance scale. On one side, raw, unfiltered strength. On the other, resentment, disguised as righteousness. The weak, unable to act, created a world where inaction was virtue, where not striking back made you holy, where not wanting too much proved your purity. They rewrote the rules, not by rising up, but by redefining what it meant to be good. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was psychological warfare and silent, internal, effective, and it worked. Over time, the new morality found pulpits, then crowns, then courtrooms. It stopped being a reaction and became a system. Religions adopted it, laws enforced it, and soon we didn't just believe in it, we became it. Even today, traces of that reversal still guide our lives. We feel guilty for ambition. We second-guess pleasure. We mistrust confidence, not because they're wrong, but because we inherited a morality built by those who feared them. And here lies Nietzsche's dangerous truth. Maybe morality wasn't handed down from the heavens. Maybe it crawled up from the shadows, dressed as goodness, built from resentment. What if that voice in your head, the one that says, be good, be nice, don't cross the line, isn't your conscience, but surveillance that you've internalized? When slave morality took hold, it didn't stay private. It grew roots, deep ones, in churches, in schools, in governments, in dinner tables. It wasn't just a belief system, it became infrastructure, and it came with a quiet promise: if you obey, you're good. But Nietzsche saw through the disguise. That promise wasn't a gift, and it was a leash. Morality, he argued, became a political instrument, a tool for shaping people from the inside out. The church glorified suffering and told millions to be patient. Your reward will come after death. The modern state adopted the same script: be obedient, be grateful, stay small. That wasn't virtue, that was training. It's not about some grand conspiracy. It's deeper than that. It's a pattern, repeated because it works. A system that teaches you not just how to act but how to feel shame for ambition, to feel guilt for desire, to fear your own freedom. And here's the twist. Even modern ideologies, the ones that claim to liberate us, often play the same game. Cancel culture, purity tests, online mobs chasing moral high ground, different clothes, same leash. Picture a city of glass, transparent rules, smiling faces, beautiful speeches about values. But beneath the surface, exhausted people, censoring themselves to stay accepted, too afraid to make one wrong move. This is the new temple of morality, no longer religious, but just as demanding, no longer based on faith, but on performance. And Nietzsche's warning cuts through time. When morality is shaped by fear and enforced through guilt, it stops guiding us and starts containing us. He wasn't just criticizing Christianity. He was revealing the moment when weakness became holy, not for healing but for control. The point where power had to apologize and obedience became the only virtue that mattered. In a world trained to mistake silence for goodness, Nietzsche dares to ask, is your morality really yours? Or were you just taught to behave? In Christian morality, Nietzsche didn't just see faith, he saw something darker: renunciation disguised as holiness, guilt packaged as compassion, resentment elevated into doctrine. To him, Christianity didn't heal the human soul, it weakened it. It took the fire of instinct and doused it with holy water. It crowned suffering, sanctified submission, turned the rejection of desire into a sacred path. This wasn't just religion, it was reversal. The bold became sinners, the joyful became suspicious, the strong became guilty. Picture it, a crown of thorns, not forced onto someone, but accepted. Worn like a badge, not out of love, out of fear. Fear of wanting too much, fear of being free. Nietzsche saw this as a deep spiritual illness, not because compassion is wrong, but because weakness in this system wasn't just tolerated, it was glorified, not from humility but from vengeance. It's the psychology of the defeated. If I can't win in the world of the strong, I'll build a morality where my failure makes me superior, where suffering makes me chosen, where self-denial earns me love. Forgiveness, he said, becomes fake when it hides a grudge. Humility becomes cowardice when it masks fear of power. This wasn't an attack on spirituality. it was a mourning, spasti, a grief for what was lost, the wild, creative, passionate side of the soul that was tamed in the name of heaven. What could have been transcendence turned into obedience. What should have been freedom became discipline, a list of rules dressed as righteousness. And buried beneath that structure, Nietzsche saw a deeper decay. Nihilism. The slow collapse of meaning. Because when life is denied again and again, when the body is shamed, desire is feared, and joy is postponed, something in us starts to rot. And what remains? A hollow system, a broken compass, a soul still breathing, but only just. When everything alive in you gets repressed, what's left behind isn't peace, it's silence. But not the calm kind. It's the silence of a house where no one believes what they're saying anymore, where the prayers still echo, but no one's listening, where obedience continues, not out of faith, but out of habit. This is the quiet Nietzsche feared most, the slow erasure of will, not the collapse of religion, but the collapse of meaning. Not atheism, but something colder, nihilism, a life stripped of pulse, a soul fed rules instead of purpose. He named the root of this sickness asceticism. The urge to purify ourselves by rejecting everything natural. The body, a burden, desire, a distraction, pleasure, a trap, the goal, to suffer beautifully, to master the art of being small, silent, and spiritually correct. But how long can anyone live like that? At first it feels noble, then it feels heavy, and finally, it just feels empty. Picture a white desert with no horizon. A lone figure walks forward, repeating words that once gave hope. Now, hollow. The light is gone. Only the ritual remains. No joy, no rebellion, just the momentum of old beliefs no one dares to question. Nietzsche doesn't celebrate this decay. He mourns it. He warns us. When we glorify suffering and deny life, we don't become divine, we become disconnected. We numb the body, shame the instinct, punish the spark. We call it spiritual. But it's just slow starvation of the soul. And yet, even here, in this bleakness, he offers a possibility. A whisper, not a promise. Not a return to old faiths, not rebellion for its own sake, but something deeper. The courage to create, to face the void and build from it, to trade obedience for authorship, to live not by rules, but by resonance. That turning point begins within. When you stop asking, what should I do, and start asking, what is trying to live through me? How many times have you said or heard someone say, I didn't do it because it wouldn't be right, but stop and ask, right according to who? And what if right isn't truth and but just fear dressed in etiquette? Nietzsche believed we often use morality as a shield, not to protect others, but to protect ourselves from life, from risk, from rejection, from the pain of trying and failing. We call success arrogance, we call freedom selfishness, we call boldness recklessness. But what if we're not judging others? What if we're just afraid to move? Picture a crow in an open cage. The sky is there, the air is warm, but the bird stays. Why? Because it was taught that flying is dangerous, that desire is wrong, that safety is virtue. So it stays, still, small, good, but deeply, painfully unfulfilled. Nietzsche called this herd morality. It teaches us that standing out is prideful, that suffering quietly is noble, that following the rules, even when they crush us, is the highest good. But this comes at a cost. We stop evolving. We stop reaching. We stop becoming. And the most tragic part? We start to believe that staying small is a sign of wisdom. We fear wanting more. We mistrust our own spark. We reject the instinct that could move us forward, calling it ego. But Nietzsche saw a crack in that cage, a breeze, a call. Not a rebellion for its own sake, but a deeper yearning to live completely. A life where morality isn't inherited, it's chosen. Not a wall to keep us in, but a path we shape with each step. A morality not of fear, but of courage. Nietzsche didn't want to burn everything down. He wanted to build something stronger, not from tradition, but from truth. Not from obedience, but from aliveness. In place of slave morality, he imagined a different future, where values are not handed down but created, not born from fear but born from freedom, not meant to contain you, but to express you. Enter the Übermensch, the overman, not a superior being in a comic book sense, but a person who transcends themselves, who doesn't settle for inherited meaning, who doesn't collapse into despair, but creates meaning, even in the void. Picture a mountain wrapped in fog, no map, no signs, no path. Only a body, breathing, moving, climbing, not knowing what's at the top, but choosing to climb anyway. That's the overman. Not someone who obeys, but someone who listens. Not someone who repeats, but someone who reimagines. Someone who says yes to life, with all its mess, beauty, risk, and contradiction. This new morality, you won't find it in books or in the approval of others. You find it in your breath, in your risk, in your willingness to live wide open, no script, no mask. It doesn't force itself on anyone. It doesn't demand conversion. It radiates, like fire that warms, without burning. Nietzsche didn't offer answers. He offered a challenge. Can you create values that honor your own life? Can you carry the weight of living by them, even when no one claps? Because maybe even that's the real freedom, and the deepest responsibility of all. Maybe Nietzsche's most daring question wasn't an attack on morality, but a mirror held up to your face. Whose values are you really living by? Are they the result of your lived experience? Or were they slipped over you gently, like a tight suit someone called protection? We live in a world where morality still circulates, not in cathedrals anymore, but in timelines. Not from preachers, but from influencers. Not carved in stone, but coded in silence. Today, good behavior wears modern clothes. It speaks of empathy, inclusion, consistency, and yet beneath the surface it often hides the same old fear of rejection, fear of standing out, fear of being called wrong. So we perform goodness, we post the right things, we say what's expected, we call it virtue, but deep down we just don't want to be left out. Nietzsche invites us to break that spell, not to become selfish, not to descend into chaos, but to finally become whole. To look at morality like you would an old family heirloom, with respect, but also with clarity. To ask, does this still fit the life I'm meant to live? Because sometimes, to honor life, you have to disobey, not with rage but with awareness. Not to destroy but to create space for something real. Picture yourself standing in front of a door. You don't know what's on the other side. But you know this much. What's behind you no longer fits. You take a breath and you step forward. Maybe that's the most moral act of all. To listen to yourself with radical honesty, to stop echoing the world and start rewriting it. One choice at a time, with courage, with truth, and with a living shadow at your side, no longer feared, but welcomed. Do you still believe that being good means following the rules, or is it possible that true goodness takes more risk and more presence? Maybe it's time to walk, not with guilt, but with wholeness, not with fear of failure, but with a commitment to something real. Because in the end, what transforms us is not obedience. It's the full embodiment of the life we're meant to live. So the real question becomes, what happens when we stop trying to be good and start daring to be whole?